The air inside the attorney's office was heavy, almost ceremonial, as if everyone had gathered not only to hear a will, but to witness the unraveling of truths that had been buried for years. The scent of polished oak furniture mixed with the faint aroma of legal pads and coffee that had gone cold. I sat rigid in my chair, my palms damp against the wooden armrests, staring at the large mahogany table where my family sat. My heart was already unsteady, but I kept telling myself that this was going to be the moment my life turned a corner. Grandpa Harold was there, his silver hair neatly combed, his posture upright, his eyes sharper than anyone would expect for a man of 78. He was always the one who saw me, who believed in me, and today he would make it official. Today, he would speak the words that would change my life. The attorney cleared his throat, the rustle of papers echoing like thunder in the stillness. All eyes turned toward the front. I swallowed hard. This was it. My breath caught when Grandpa leaned slightly forward, his voice calm but resonant, steady like a gavel striking. $5 million each, he said. Every grandchild will receive $5 million. For a second time, froze. 5 million. The words echoed in my skull like a cathedral bell. Relief flooded through me. My lips curled into a smile that I could not suppress. For the first time in years, I felt the weight lift. All the nights of working long hours, of doubting myself, of hearing my mother tell me I would never amount to anything, all of that dissolved in the single promise of security and freedom. I closed my eyes, clutching onto that fragile sense of triumph. Then I felt a shift beside me. My mother Linda leaned closer, her perfume sharp, her voice no more than a whisper but laced with venom that sliced through my euphoria. "Not for you," she hissed, the words dripping like poison directly into my ear. My smile faltered, my throat clenched, and a chill raced down my spine. I turned my head slowly, my eyes meeting hers. She sat there with a look of grim satisfaction, as if she had been waiting for this very moment to crush me. My pulse roared in my ears. I looked around the table. My brother Ryan smirked, shifting in his chair with that arrogant ease he always carried when he knew something I did not. The attorney hesitated, sensing the sudden tension. My grandfather frowned clearly, noticing the change in my expression. The entire room seemed to tilt. The warmth that had filled me seconds before evaporated into a freezing fog of doubt and fear. 5 million each. Not for you. 2 sentences colliding inside my chest, ripping apart the fragile hope I had clung to. I wanted to speak, to demand an explanation, but my tongue felt glued to the roof of my mouth. The silence around the table was suffocating, pressing down on me like a physical weight. Guests who had come to witness shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting from my pale face to my mother's cold gaze. I heard the faint click of Aunt Margaret's pen, her steady eyes narrowing as she studied the exchange. She knew something. She always did. I gripped the edge of the table so hard that my knuckles whitened, trying to anchor myself, trying not to break in front of them. I had walked into this room thinking justice was finally within reach, that the years of humiliation were about to be wiped away. Instead, in a whisper, barely louder than breath, my mother had thrown me into a nightmare I had not seen coming. The attorney shuffled the papers again, oblivious to the war that had just detonated in a single whisper. I froze, my body rigid, my face betraying the storm inside. Across from me, Ryan's smirk widened, his eyes gleaming with a cruelty I recognized all too well. He leaned back, stretching his arms as if he had already won. My stomach dropped. Something was terribly wrong, and everyone except me seemed to know it. My grandfather tapped his fingers against the table, his sharp eyes scanning us one by one. He knew tension when he saw it, and he would not let it slide for long. But at that moment, I sat paralyzed, my mind replaying her words on an endless loop. Not for you. Each repetition cut deeper, shredding the fragile joy that had dared to take root. I wanted to scream. I wanted to demand the truth, but all I could do was sit there frozen, every muscle locked in shock. The room was quiet, but inside my head there was nothing but the deafening crash of betrayal. My story had just begun, and already the floor beneath me was crumbling. When my mother's whisper cut through the air at the will reading, it forced me back into memories I had carried for years. memories that shaped who I was and why this moment mattered so much. My name is Claire Thompson. I am 28 years old, and for as long as I can remember, I have carried a dream that felt both fragile and indestructible. I wanted to open my own interior design studio, a place where I could bring together beauty and function where every corner would tell a story. That dream was my lifeline in a family that seemed determined to make me feel small. Grandpa Harold was the first person who believed in that dream. I remember being 15, standing awkwardly in the garage with my sketchbook full of half-finished drawings too embarrassed to show anyone. He walked in quietly, his steps measured his eyes kind. Instead of mocking my clumsy lines, he set a heavy box on the table and said, "Open it, Claire." Inside was a full set of professional drawing tools, markers, scales, papers of different textures. I was stunned. No one in my house ever gave me something that acknowledged my talent. My mother would buy Ryan expensive sports gear, brand new suits, even a car when he turned 18, but for me, she always said, "You do not need much. You will never make a living drawing lines." That night when I opened that box, Grandpa's belief wrapped around me like a shield. He told me, "You have a gift, and you should never let anyone convince you otherwise." Those words carried me through high school and college. Every time Ryan shoved me aside, every time my mother criticized me for not being like him, I repeated Grandpa's words like a prayer. Linda, my mother, had a way of twisting reality. When I brought home good grades, she would say, "They are fine, but Ryan's football game was the real achievement today." When I landed a part-time job at a design store, she called it a distraction, and Ryan, spoiled and entitled, made sure I never forgot my place. He once grabbed my portfolio and tossed it on the floor just to laugh at my reaction. The bruises on my confidence hurt more than any physical shove he ever gave me. Yet through all of it, I had one anchor, the dream of my studio, and the quiet support of my grandfather. In college, I worked late nights at cafes, saving every dollar I could. I told myself that one day I would leave Chicago and return to Salt Lake City, open a studio that bore my name, a space where creativity would replace control, where clients would walk in and feel at home. Because every design came from a place of authenticity. When I called Grandpa to tell him about my plans, he laughed softly, not mocking, but proud. "That is my girl," he said. "You go after it." My mother overheard once and scoffed, "He is filling your head with fantasies. Ryan will inherit the real responsibilities." It was always like that. She saw Ryan as the future and me as an inconvenience. Yet every small victory reminded me that I was not powerless. When I got my first freelance project designing a coffee shop interior, I invited Grandpa. He sat in the corner sipping tea, watching people admire my work. He told me afterward, "Claire, you will do greater things. Do not doubt it." That belief kept me going even when my bank account was thin and my energy was stretched. I had been living in a small apartment in Chicago, working as an assistant at a larger design firm, pitching ideas only to see them stolen by senior designers. I dreamed of the day I could walk away, unlock the door to my own studio, and feel the freedom I had been denied for so long at home. In contrast, Ryan had no such vision. He floated from job to job depending on my mother to cover his expenses, showing off new watches or cars he could not afford. Mom encouraged it, excusing him, praising him, enabling him. I often wondered why she resented me so deeply, why she always chose to lift him up while pressing me down. Maybe because I reminded her of the independence she never had. Maybe because I refused to bend the way she wanted. All I knew was that in her eyes, Ryan could do no wrong and I could do no right. That was why the will reading mattered more to me than just money. It was a validation that someone in this family saw me for who I was. When Grandpa said 5 million each, I heard more than a number. I heard, "Claire, you matter as much as anyone else." That was why the whisper from my mother cut so deep. It was not only about money. It was about her endless attempt to erase me, to push me out of every circle that could give me power. As I sat in that office, her words echoing, I remembered all the times she had dismissed my dreams. "You will end up with nothing," she once told me, "and when you do, do not come crying to me." Those words haunted me, but the studio in my mind haunted me louder. I saw walls painted in calm tones, furniture hand-picked spaces that breathed possibility. I saw my name on the glass door. I saw clients smiling. That vision never left me. Grandpa had told me once courage is not about fighting with fists, Claire. It is about standing when the people closest to you try to cut you down. I repeated that in my head as I tried to process the whisper at the will reading. Not for you. My dream was hanging by a thread, but that thread was woven from years of determination, belief, and silent resistance. The foundation of my life had been shaky because of Linda and Ryan, but the roots of my dream ran deep thanks to Grandpa. I clung to that belief as the air grew heavy in the room. This was not only about inheritance, it was about proving that I was not invisible. It was about proving that the girl with the sketchbook in the garage had grown into a woman who would not be erased. The night before the will reading, my phone rang with a number I knew too well. It was my mother. I hesitated before answering because every call from her carried a weight that left me drained. I pressed accept, bracing myself. Her tone was brisk, clipped, almost rehearsed. "Claire, do not bother coming tomorrow. Your grandfather is not feeling well. The reading is canceled." The words hit me wrong immediately. Grandpa had been talking about this meeting for months. He was meticulous, organized, not the kind of man to postpone such a critical moment without telling me himself. I asked her, "What do you mean he is not well?" She replied, "Just a cold, nothing serious. You stay where you are. No need to come." Her tone was rushed dismissive, and she ended the call before I could push further. My stomach knotted. Something was not right. I opened my text, scrolling, searching for any message from Grandpa. Nothing. He usually checked on me often, asking about work, reminding me to eat. If he had truly been unwell, he would have called me directly. I stared at my screen, the unease growing heavier by the second. I called Aunt Margaret. She answered with her calm voice, the kind that always cut through chaos. "Canceled," she repeated, incredulous. "No, I was at Harold's house yesterday. He was fine going over the menu, talking about the meeting with the attorney. He has been looking forward to this." Why would Linda say otherwise? The confirmation jolted me. My mother had lied. Again. Aunt Margaret paused and added, "Claire, I saw your brother and your mother whispering together last week. Something about money papers. Be careful tomorrow." That warning echoed in my ears long after the call ended. My thoughts raced. Why would my mother try to stop me from attending? If Grandpa had intended to divide everything equally, what did Linda fear I might hear? I began replaying past moments. I remembered when she had shoved a document in front of me years ago, insisting I sign it quickly, telling me it was just for school paperwork. I had signed then, too naive to question. What if she had tried to repeat something similar? I opened my laptop and logged into my bank account, scrolling through past transactions. My eyes caught a vague transfer unmarked, hidden among routine charges. I could not decipher it fully, but it left a strange ache in my chest. Could this be linked to what Linda was hiding? I could not sleep that night. My mind kept circling back to Ryan's smirk, the way he had always acted as if everything was already his. He had bragged in the past about trips to Vegas, about designer watches, about new cars that seemed too expensive for a man who never kept a steady job. How did he afford it? My suspicion deepened. I pictured the attorney's office, imagined the papers being read aloud, imagined my mother's cold gaze. A storm was brewing. I began packing. If they thought a phone call would keep me away, they underestimated me. I bought a ticket back to Salt Lake City. Only a 3-hour flight from Chicago, but in that time, my mind traveled years. I thought of the nights when Ryan barged into my room to take my things. I thought of Linda's lectures, her endless refrain that I was wasting my life. I thought of Grandpa's steady voice reminding me to stand tall. Tomorrow, I promised myself I would stand in that room no matter what awaited me. At the airport, my nerves buzzed. People hurried past with suitcases, children clutched toys, announcements echoed. I clutched my bag tighter inside it, the small leather notebook where I sketched ideas for my dream studio. That notebook had become more than paper. It was proof of my identity, the part of me my family had tried to erase. On the plane, as engines roared, I rehearsed what I might say if challenged. I imagined Linda denying me Ryan, mocking me, but I also pictured myself standing firm, demanding the truth. Landing in Salt Lake. I rented a car and drove through familiar streets. Snow dusted the mountains in the distance, their peaks sharp against the winter sky. My chest tightened as I neared the neighborhood where I had grown up. The houses were the same, yet I felt like a stranger returning to a battlefield. I called Aunt Margaret once more. She answered quickly. "I am glad you are coming," she said. "Harold has been worried about you. He asked me yesterday if you would be there. I promised him I would be." Her words steadied me. That night, I stayed in a small motel near downtown. Sleep eluded me again. Every creak of the building sounded like a warning. My heart beat fast as I pictured tomorrow. I replayed my mother's voice. "Do not come." The certainty that she was hiding something grew stronger. I stared at the ceiling until dawn, whispering to myself, "I will not be erased." Morning came too soon. I dressed in my best suit, nothing extravagant but professional. I wanted to walk into that office not as the timid daughter they remembered, but as the woman who had built herself despite them. Driving to the attorney's building, my hands gripped the wheel tightly. Each mile felt like another step toward confrontation. I parked, sat in silence for a moment, gathering courage. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Stay away," it read. My breath caught. My mother. It had to be. Or Ryan. My hands shook, but I refused to retreat. I walked into the building, my heels clicking against the polished floor. At the receptionist's desk, I gave my name. She smiled politely and said, "They are waiting for you." I nodded, my stomach twisting. The elevator ride felt endless. As the doors opened, I saw the long hallway leading to the attorney's office. Each step echoed like a drumbeat of fate. My suspicion had become certainty. They had planned something. They had lied, manipulated, tried to keep me away. But here I was walking into the storm. The moment I stepped into the attorney's office, I could feel every eye turn toward me, as though my presence was an unwelcome interruption. The room was large, the windows tall, the light cold against the polished wood. At the far end sat the attorney, Mr. Collins, a man in his 60s with a calm demeanor and papers neatly stacked before him. To his right was Grandpa Harold, straight-backed, his sharp eyes immediately softening when they found me. He gave me a small nod, the kind that said without words that he was glad I had come. But to his left, my mother and brother shifted uncomfortably, their faces stiffening as if I had broken some unspoken rule simply by walking through the door. Linda's lips pressed together into a tight line. Ryan leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, his smirk a silent warning. I took a seat at the edge of the table, trying to steady my breathing. My heartbeat thudded so loudly I thought it might give me away. The atmosphere was heavy, and though there were a few cousins and distant relatives present, their chatter died quickly. It was clear that the undercurrent of tension centered on me. Mr. Collins welcomed everyone and began with the usual formalities. He spoke of Harold's decision to update his will, the careful planning that had gone into it, the intention to make sure his legacy was handled with fairness. His words were professional measured, but my attention kept slipping to the side where my mother sat. Her eyes darted from me to Ryan, then back again, calculating, always calculating. When Grandpa's voice cut through it, startled me. He spoke firmly despite his age. "This is a moment for family to be honest," he said. "I have made my decisions and I stand by them." My chest tightened with anticipation. I looked at him with gratitude, clinging to the hope that whatever game Linda was playing, he would not allow it. Still, unease gnawed at me. I could not forget the whisper from earlier. "Not for you." It echoed in my mind, poisoning every hopeful thought. Mr. Collins continued opening the envelope, pulling out the documents, his voice deliberate as he read the lines. I tried to focus on the words, but my eyes betrayed me, glancing at my mother. She sat like stone, her expression unreadable. Ryan, on the other hand, looked almost amused, as though he already knew the ending to a play I had just entered. I forced a smile as the first allocations were read, smaller amounts to charities and extended relatives. Then came the line about the grandchildren. $5 million each. Mr. Collins set his voice even. Relief washed over me, and for a heartbeat I allowed myself to breathe. My lips parted in a tentative smile. But then I felt it again, the sudden lean of my mother toward me. Her perfume, her whisper sharp and cutting. "Not for you." I stiffened. My smile collapsed. I turned toward her, my eyes wide, searching for some explanation, some sign that I had misheard. but her gaze was icy, her chin lifted with quiet defiance. She wanted me to know that she believed she had already won. Across the table, Ryan gave a slight laugh under his breath, subtle enough that only I could catch it, his shoulders shaking with barely contained glee. I felt the room closing in on me. Everyone else heard the official words, but I heard the secret battle playing underneath them. My pulse hammered. I clenched my fists in my lap, fighting the urge to shout. Aunt Margaret cleared her throat gently, her eyes narrowing at Linda. It was a small gesture, but I caught it, the silent acknowledgement that she saw through the facade. I leaned forward, trying to mask my shaking voice. "Thank you, Grandpa," I said softly, hoping to cut through the suffocating silence, but the words barely left my lips before Ryan interrupted with a smug comment. "Some of us know how to use money wisely," he muttered, not even bothering to look at me. The attorney frowned at the disruption, but Ryan only shrugged. My cheeks burned. The urge to confront them surged within me, but I held back. "Not here, not yet," I told myself. The documents rustled as Mr. Collins prepared to move forward. I sat rigid, my body tense, every nerve on edge. Grandpa reached across the table, his hand steady as it tapped against the wood. "Claire," he said, his voice firm but kind, "your share is secured. You earned it by being who you are." The sincerity in his words nearly broke me. My throat tightened, tears stung my eyes, but before I could reply, Linda's sharp voice cut in. "She has already refused it, Father. Remember the papers. She signed." The words dropped like stones into the silence. I froze. My eyes snapped to hers. Papers. Signed. My mind spun. What was she talking about? My heart raced as every guest turned their gaze toward me. I shook my head slowly, whispering, "I never signed anything." But Linda's expression remained firm, her eyes challenging me. Ryan leaned in, his grin broadening. The tension thickened. Mr. Collins looked startled, flipping quickly through his folder, his brow furrowing as he pulled out a single page. I watched in horror as he laid it on the table. There, in black ink, was a signature that looked like mine. The blood drained from my face. A chill shot through me. That was not my signature, but to anyone else it might look convincing. Whispers spread among the relatives, their eyes darting between the paper and me. My chest tightened, my vision blurred. I tried to speak, but my voice cracked. "That is not mine," I said louder this time, forcing strength into the words. My mother tilted her head, her expression calm, almost smug. "You signed it years ago," she insisted. "You cannot back out now." The walls felt like they were closing in, the oxygen thin, the weight of their manipulation crushing me. My fingers dug into the table edge, fighting the wave of despair. I glanced at Grandpa. His jaw was tight, his eyes blazing. He knew. He saw through the lie. That was the only anchor I had in that suffocating moment. Aunt Margaret's pen clicked again, sharp, deliberate, as though signaling to me that this was not over. And it was not. I might have felt cornered, but I knew deep inside that the truth had a way of clawing its way into the light. The page with the forged signature lay between us like a blade, sharp and accusing. My pulse thundered in my ears, drowning out the murmurs of distant relatives as their eyes flicked between me, my mother, and Ryan. My mouth was dry, but I forced myself to breathe to anchor my voice in something steady. "That is not my signature," I repeated louder this time, my words slicing through the heavy air. Ryan chuckled under his breath, the sound laced with arrogance. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, eyes glinting with mischief. "Maybe you just forgot Claire. You have always been careless with details." His words were meant to sting, to paint me as unreliable, and some of the cousins shifted uncomfortably, their faces uncertain. My mother pounced on the hesitation. She raised her chin, her tone crisp. "Claire, you signed that paper long ago. It was your decision. We all remember." She gestured vaguely to the room, as if willing others to support her claim. But the silence that followed was telling. No one moved, no one agreed, though a few avoided my gaze, unwilling to be caught in the crossfire. I pressed my hands against the table, leaning closer, my voice shaking but firm. "I never signed away my inheritance. I never would." "You are lying." My mother's lips curved into a thin smile, her eyes narrowing. Her calm demeanor was more dangerous than shouting. She thrived on control, on twisting narratives, but I had spent my life studying her tactics, and I recognized the performance. Grandpa Harold cleared his throat, his voice carrying authority. "Linda, enough. Claire has a right to defend herself." His words gave me a flicker of strength, though my mother's eyes flashed with annoyance. Ryan scoffed, shaking his head, muttering under his breath. I felt anger simmering inside me, memories bubbling to the surface. I remembered the countless times Linda had shoved papers in front of me, demanding a quick signature without explanation. I remembered being told, "This is for school, this is for your future sign here. Do not ask questions." Could one of those have been twisted into this forgery? The thought made my stomach twist. Aunt Margaret shifted in her chair, her gaze fixed firmly on Linda and Ryan. She leaned forward slightly, her voice calm but edged with suspicion. "I remember overhearing you two last week," she said slowly. "Something about making sure Claire would not get in the way." The room stiffened. Linda's eyes darted to Ryan, his smirk faltering for the first time. He shot her a look that screamed silent fury. My heart leapt, but I forced myself to stay composed. This was not the time to let emotions spill over. The attorney frowned, flipping through his files, his hands trembling slightly. He looked at me, then at Grandpa, then back at Linda. "I will need to verify the authenticity of this document," he said carefully. "It is unusual that Claire would have signed such a paper without legal counsel." The tension spiked. Ryan suddenly leaned back, stretching his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "Well, maybe she realized she does not deserve it. She has done nothing compared to me. I have plans. I am going to invest in real estate, multiply what I receive, carry the family legacy forward." His arrogance filled the room, every word meant to diminish me. I clenched my fists, my nails biting into my palms, fighting the urge to shout back. But then Aunt Margaret's gaze caught mine again, steady and reassuring. She wanted me to wait to let their lies unravel themselves. My mother placed a hand on Ryan's arm as though to calm him, but her fingers gripped too tightly, betraying her own nerves. Her voice softened, but the edge remained. "Claire, sometimes you need to accept reality. Not everyone is meant to handle responsibility." Her words cut deep, echoing years of the same refrain. But this time something inside me pushed back. My voice rose stronger than I expected. "Responsibility. I have worked for everything I own. I have built myself without your help. Do not stand there and say I cannot handle responsibility." The room fell silent, my words hanging like a challenge. Grandpa's eyes gleamed with pride. For the first time, I saw a shadow of doubt cross a few relatives' faces as they looked at Linda and Ryan. They had seen enough through the years to question her narrative. Ryan shifted uncomfortably, his jaw tightening. He muttered something too low to catch his bravado cracking. I knew then that I had struck a nerve. The attorney cleared his throat again, his discomfort obvious. "We will need further clarification before proceeding," he said. "Until then, no assumptions can be made." Linda's face hardened, her mask slipping. She turned toward me, her whisper sharp enough to pierce the air. "You should have stayed away." My heart pounded, but I met her gaze head on. "I am here," I said quietly, "and I am not leaving." The defiance in my tone startled even me. My mother flinched slightly, her composure faltering. For once, she did not have a ready retort. Grandpa leaned forward, his hand steady on the table. "Claire belongs here as much as anyone." His voice was final, undeniable. My chest swelled with a mix of fear and relief. The battle was far from over, but for the first time I felt the ground shift beneath us. Their lies were fraying, their confidence cracking, and though the storm was only beginning, I knew I was no longer standing in silence. The tension in the room had reached a breaking point, every word heavy enough to shatter what little civility remained. The attorney shuffled nervously with the documents, but Grandpa Harold's sharp voice cut through the noise. "Enough!" He leaned forward, his eyes burning with determination. "Claire, your portion of the estate is $5 million. It is yours as I intended." His tone left no room for debate. Relief flooded me, but before I could speak, my mother's voice rose high and sharp. "No, she has already refused it. She signed the papers. She does not want it." The words were venom loud enough for every person in the room to hear. Gasps rippled across the table. I slammed my hand against the wood, the crack startling even me. "I never signed anything," I shouted, my voice shaking but fierce. I never would. My mother's face darkened, her eyes glittering with defiance. She opened her mouth again, but this time Grandpa Harold slammed his palm down on the table, glasses rattling, voices silenced. "Linda, stop lying." His command was thunderous, but Ryan would not back down. He suddenly stood his chair, screeching across the floor. He jabbed a finger at me, his voice booming. "She is lying. She is trying to steal what is mine." He pounded his fist against the table, his body trembling with rage. The attorney rose quickly, alarm flickering across his face. "Mr. Thompson, calm down." But Ryan's fury only grew. He lunged toward the attorney, snatching at the paper with the forged signature. His movements were wild, uncontrolled. I pushed back my chair, my heart racing as chaos erupted. The attorney shouted for security, and Aunt Margaret's voice rose sharply. "Stop him!" Ryan crumpled the page in his fist, but before he could tear it apart, 2 security guards rushed in, seizing his arms, dragging him back. His face was red sweat glistening on his brow, his voice hoarse as he screamed accusations. "She does not deserve anything. She is nothing." My mother leapt from her chair, rushing to his side, her hands clutching his shoulders. "Leave him alone," she cried, her voice breaking. "He is my son!" The room dissolved into noise, relatives gasping, whispering, some backing away in fear. The attorney, shaken, called out, "Someone notify the police." Within minutes, 2 officers entered their presence, cutting through the chaos. They moved swiftly, their authority unquestionable. One officer addressed Ryan firmly. "Sir, calm down, hands behind your back." Ryan resisted at first, his body thrashing, but the guards tightened their grip, forcing his arms back. My mother screamed again, tears streaking her face, her voice desperate. "You cannot do this. He has done nothing wrong." But her pleas fell flat. The forged document lay on the floor, crumpled but damning. The officer picked it up, examining it, then looking directly at me. "Is this your signature, ma'am?" My throat tightened, but I forced myself to speak clearly. "No, it is not. It is a forgery. My grandfather has the originals." Grandpa nodded, pulling from his folder a sealed packet, pristine and undeniable. "I anticipated this," he said coldly. "I knew they would try something. Here are the originals, notarized, certified." The room stilled. My mother's face drained of color, her lips trembling. Ryan's defiance faltered as the officer secured him, his eyes wide with panic. Aunt Margaret leaned forward, her voice calm but firm. "I have recordings," she said. "Last week I overheard Linda and Ryan plotting. I thought it might come to this, so I recorded it." She held up a small device, the proof gleaming like a sword. My knees nearly buckled. For years I had felt cornered, powerless, suffocated by their control. Now in this moment, the truth was clawing its way into the open. The attorney nodded gravely. "Officers, I believe you have enough cause to take statements." The officers moved to Linda as well, their voices steady. "Ma'am, we will need to speak with you too." My mother shook her head violently, backing away, her hands raised in denial. "No, you cannot. This is a misunderstanding." But the weight of evidence was undeniable. One officer gently but firmly guided her forward, reciting her rights. The relatives sat frozen, their faces pale, the reality of betrayal unfolding before them. My chest heaved, my hands trembling, but my voice found strength. "You tried to erase me," I said, my words slicing through the silence. "You spent years telling me I was nothing, and now you tried to steal my future. Everyone in this room can see you for what you are." My mother's eyes widened, fury and desperation battling within them. Ryan struggled against the officers, but his words came out as broken shouts, his power stripped away. Grandpa Harold stood tall, his voice like steel. "You betrayed this family. You betrayed me. From this moment forward, you are cut off." His declaration rang louder than anything else that day. The police escorted Linda and Ryan out, their protests fading down the hall. The attorney gathered the documents with shaking hands, his voice subdued. "We will proceed, but this matter will now involve the courts." Around me, whispers filled the room, relatives shaking their heads, some avoiding my eyes, others staring with sympathy. Aunt Margaret touched my hand briefly, her grip warm, steady, a silent message. "You are not alone." I sat down slowly, the adrenaline-draining tears burning at the corners of my eyes. The confrontation had exploded public and undeniable, and though my body shook, I knew something vital had shifted. For the first time, their control had cracked wide open and everyone had seen the truth. The storm had erupted in front of witnesses and there was no going back. When the door closed behind the officers escorting Linda and Ryan away, the silence that followed was suffocating. The attorney wiped his brow and carefully placed the packet of original documents on the table as though anchoring the entire room to truth. My body was still trembling, but I forced myself to sit straighter. For years I had been made to feel small, but now their lies had burst open like a rotten fruit in front of everyone. Mr. Collins, the attorney, cleared his throat, his voice unsteady but precise. "For the record, these are the notarized originals prepared months ago by Mr. Harold Thompson." He looked directly at me, then at the group of witnesses. "This forged paper is a criminal matter and will be submitted to investigators." I swallowed hard, my pulse beginning to slow. Grandpa Harold leaned toward me, his hand covering mine with steady reassurance. "I told you, Claire, I would not let them erase you." His words were firm, his eyes bright, though shadowed with disappointment at his own daughter. Aunt Margaret placed the small recorder on the table, pressing play. The room filled with the scratchy but unmistakable voices of Linda and Ryan. Linda's voice was hushed but clear. "We will make sure Claire never touches that money. She will believe she signed it away years ago." Ryan laughed in the recording, confident, smug. "She is too naive, she will not fight back." Gasps spread around the table, relatives covering their mouths in disbelief. My chest tightened, but I felt a strange release hearing their voices trap them in their own betrayal. No one could deny it now. Margaret stopped the recording, her eyes meeting mine full of quiet triumph. Mr. Collins shook his head, the weight of it heavy. "In all my years, I have rarely seen something so blatant," he said. "Forgery, fraud, conspiracy." The words rang like verdicts even before a judge would speak. The officers remaining in the room gathered statements. They asked me directly if I recognized the signature. I told them clearly it was not mine. They asked if I had ever been pressured into signing papers by my mother. I admitted yes, several times in the past, though I had never known what they truly contained. The officers wrote diligently, nodding gravely. Linda and Ryan were being processed in another room, their voices faint down the hall, rising in desperate protests. I caught the sound of my mother's anger breaking through her mask, her words high-pitched and frantic. "She has always been trouble. She deserves nothing." The officers ignored her. Ryan's voice barked curses muffled by distance until finally silence took their place. My body sagged with exhaustion, but I remained upright, determined not to show weakness. Grandpa spoke again, his voice carrying to every corner. "Claire, you are my granddaughter. You are part of this family, and you always will be. But those who betray trust do not deserve forgiveness so easily." His declaration settled like a gavel. Relatives who had once remained neutral now avoided Linda and Ryan's defense altogether, whispering instead about the audacity of their scheme. Aunt Margaret leaned closer, whispering only for me. "This is far from over, but you have the truth on your side now." Her words steadied me. Hours blurred as statements were taken, photographs made of the forged paper recordings cataloged, evidence sealed. Finally, one officer addressed me directly. "Miss Thompson, you will likely need to testify when this reaches court. Are you prepared for that?" My throat tightened, but I nodded. I have lived under their control all my life. I am ready to speak the truth. Grandpa's hand squeezed mine, a silent pledge of support. When the formalities ended and relatives began to drift out, the atmosphere remained charged. Some approached me quietly, offering sympathy. Some simply shook their heads in disbelief. For years, many had ignored the tension, believing my mother's polished exterior and Ryan's charm. Now the mask was gone, and they had witnessed the ugliness beneath. As I stepped outside, the cold air slapped my face, bringing clarity. The flashing lights of police cars painted the evening sky. Linda and Ryan were led past me, their hands secured, their eyes wild. Ryan glared at me, his teeth clenched, spitting words through gritted rage. "You think you have won. This is not over." But the sight of the officers guiding him away muted his threat. My mother's face was pale, her voice hoarse as she tried one last time. "Claire, please, we are family." I stared at her, unable to summon pity. "Family does not forge signatures," I said evenly. "Family does not erase their own." She flinched as if struck before being ushered into the police car. The doors slammed shut. I stood there trembling, yet rooted in the truth that finally, after years of silence, the world had seen what I endured. Back inside the office, Grandpa and Aunt Margaret guided me to a chair. "You did well," Margaret said softly. "You held your ground." Mr. Collins entered once more, adjusting his glasses. "This case will go to court quickly," he explained. "The evidence is overwhelming, but the process takes time." I nodded, feeling both relief and dread. The battle was far from finished, but the tide had turned. Later that night, I lay awake replaying every detail. The forged document, the recording Ryan's violent outburst, my mother's desperate lies. The images replayed like scenes burned into my mind. Yet beneath the exhaustion, there was strength. For the first time, I felt the power of truth standing beside me, not hidden, not silenced. Days turned into weeks. Investigators called me often asking for clarifications. I signed official statements and reviewed documents that confirmed the fraud. Each step was heavy but necessary. I carried my sketchbook with me to every meeting as a reminder of who I was beyond the chaos. Aunt Margaret accompanied me more than once, her presence steady as shield against the weight of it all. Grandpa, though weary, never missed a chance to remind me that courage was born in truth. As the court date drew nearer, the media whispered about the scandal. Neighbors who once praised Linda for her social charm now looked at her with suspicion. Ryan vanished from his usual hangouts, his bravado crushed. When I caught my reflection in the mirror one evening, I hardly recognized the woman staring back. She looked stronger, sharper, forged by fire. The truth had broken open, and though the trial lay ahead, I no longer feared it. I knew their lies had already collapsed under the weight of evidence and witnesses. What remained was justice. The weeks that followed the chaotic will reading unfolded like a slow march toward a reckoning. Every day carried the weight of anticipation as investigators dug deeper into the forgery and fraud that Linda and Ryan had orchestrated. I found myself summoned repeatedly to provide statements each session, both exhausting and liberating. For years I had been silenced, but now every detail I spoke became another brick in the wall of truth that would finally contain them. The attorneys moved with precision, collecting evidence, interviewing witnesses, examining bank records that traced extravagant purchases to money siphoned from accounts linked to the estate. Designer trips, expensive cars, and unexplained withdrawals all pointed back to them. Each revelation confirmed what I had suspected. All along, their lifestyle had been built not on hard work, but on deceit. Grandpa Harold was steadfast through it all. Despite his age, he attended every meeting, his presence a reminder that I was not alone. He would sit quietly occasionally, interjecting with clarity that reminded everyone in the room that his mind was sharp and his memory unclouded. He had anticipated betrayal, and his preparation was the reason their scheme had unraveled so quickly. Aunt Margaret, too, became a central figure, her recording providing irrefutable evidence of intent. She testified during preliminary hearings, her calm voice recounting exactly what she had overheard, her tone unwavering even when Linda's attorney attempted to undermine her credibility. Watching her stand firm filled me with pride and gratitude. The pretrial hearing arrived in March. The courthouse in Salt Lake City was crowded, reporters hovering outside, curious neighbors whispering in the hallways. When I stepped into the courtroom, my knees trembled, but I held my head high. Across the aisle sat Linda and Ryan, both looking diminished. Linda's once impeccable style seemed wilted, her hair hastily tied back, her eyes hollow. Ryan tried to project confidence, but his clenched jaw and restless tapping betrayed him. The judge entered the gavel struck and the proceedings began. The prosecution laid out the evidence: clearly forged documents, recordings, financial trails, and testimony. The defense attempted to claim misunderstanding, suggesting that I had signed papers years ago without memory that Ryan and Linda believed the money was rightfully theirs. But the evidence was overwhelming. When the forged signature was displayed side by side with authenticated examples of my handwriting, the contrast was obvious. Gasps rippled through the courtroom as the truth stared back at everyone in black ink. The judge's eyes narrowed, his voice stern. "This matter will proceed to full trial." Linda gasped audibly, her composure cracking. Ryan muttered angrily under his breath, his fists clenched. The bailiffs moved closer, ready should he lose control again. I sat quietly, hands folded, my heart pounding but steady. I had faced their lies my entire life. Facing them here with the law behind me was both terrifying and empowering. Months passed as the trial date approached. Each day I worked at the design firm in Chicago while preparing for testimony, balancing sketches for clients with statements for attorneys. At night, I would sit at my desk, sketchbook open, but often I would find myself staring at the same unfinished lines, lost in thought. Yet even in those moments of doubt, I reminded myself that truth was stronger than fear. June arrived, and with it the trial. The courthouse brimmed with anticipation. Family members, journalists, even old neighbors filled the benches. I walked in wearing a navy suit, my hair pulled back, determined to project the strength I had fought to build. When I took my seat, I could feel eyes on me, some sympathetic, some skeptical, but none indifferent. The prosecution began with a clear narrative. Harold Thompson intended equal inheritance. Linda and Ryan conspired to alter that outcome through forgery and deceit. Exhibit after exhibit was presented: notarized originals, recordings, bank records. Aunt Margaret testified again, her calm delivery cutting through every attempt by the defense to dismiss her. When it was my turn to testify, my palms sweated, but I kept my voice steady. I spoke of the night my mother called to tell me the reading was canceled, of my suspicions, of the moment I walked into the attorney's office and heard her whisper, "Not for you." I recounted the discovery of the forged document, my shock, my denial. My words trembled at times, but each truth I spoke felt like a stone placed firmly in the foundation of justice. The defense tried to rattle me. They asked if I had ever been careless with documents, if I might have signed something without remembering. I held my ground. "I have always been careful," I answered. "And even if I had once been pressured, I would never sign away my future knowingly." The judge listened intently, his gaze sharp. Then came the most dramatic moment. Ryan was called to testify. He strutted to the stand, at first his voice loud, his answers clipped. But under cross-examination, his bravado slipped. The prosecutor pressed him about the bank records, the extravagant purchases. Where did the money come from? Ryan stumbled, his words tangling. Finally, in frustration, he snapped, "So what if I used it? It was mine to use." The courtroom erupted. The prosecutor leaned in. "That money was never yours. It belonged to Claire." Ryan's face flushed, his voice cracking as he tried to backtrack, but the damage was done. His own admission hung in the air like a confession. Linda fared no better. When she testified, she tried to appear composed, painting herself as a mother misunderstood, claiming she acted only to help her son. But when the recording was played in court, her voice conspiring against me, her mask crumbled. Tears streaked her face, but the judge's eyes remained cold. The trial concluded after days of testimony. The jury deliberated for hours before returning with a verdict: guilty on charges of fraud and forgery. The judge's voice was firm as he delivered sentencing in July. Linda Thompson and Ryan Thompson are hereby sentenced to probation of 3 years restitution to the victim Claire Thompson, totaling $200,000, and are permanently removed from any claims to the estate of Harold Thompson. The gavel struck. My breath caught in my throat. It was not prison, but it was justice. They were branded guilty, their reputations destroyed, their inheritance gone. Grandpa Harold exhaled deeply, his shoulders relaxing for the first time in months. Aunt Margaret smiled faintly, her eyes glistening with relief. Linda sobbed quietly. Ryan sat rigid, his face twisted with rage but powerless. As I left the courthouse, flashes from cameras blinded me. Voices shouting questions, but I kept walking. The sun was warm on my face, and though the road ahead remained heavy with scars, I felt lighter. Justice had been served, and for the first time in years, I felt the ground solid beneath my feet. The verdict had been read, but the aftermath was only beginning. News of the trial spread quickly through Salt Lake City. Articles appeared in local papers, neighbors whispered in grocery store aisles, and the Thompson name, once associated with respect and stability, was now tangled with scandal. For Linda and Ryan, the fall from grace was swift and brutal. The probation terms required constant reporting, and community service and restitution payments to me loomed over every decision they made. They had been cut from Grandpa's estate, officially their lifeline severed. My mother, who once held her head high at every church gathering, now avoided eye contact when she ventured outside. Friends, who had once praised her for her elegance, crossed the street to avoid the discomfort of conversation. Her social calendar emptied, invitations disappeared, and slowly the glamorous image she had cultivated crumbled into isolation. Ryan fared no better. His temper, which had once been tolerated in small circles, now marked him as unstable. He was forced to sell his car, a flashy vehicle he had paraded around town, to scrape together a fraction of restitution. His designer watches and suits went to pawn shops one by one, each sale a reminder that the wealth he flaunted had never been real. He moved with my mother into a cramped apartment on the outskirts of the city, far from the manicured streets they once called home. The place was small walls thin, neighbors unkind. It was a far cry from the life they believed they deserved. At first, I thought hearing of their struggles would bring me satisfaction, but instead it left me hollow. The damage had been done, trust shattered, and though consequences were necessary, they did not restore what had been stolen from me emotionally. Grandpa Harold remained resolute. He made a public statement standing beside me, and Aunt Margaret declaring that betrayal in family is still betrayal and must be met with truth. His words carried weight in the community. Many who had once hesitated to support me now reached out, expressing sorrow for doubting me, offering encouragement as I began piecing my life back together. But even as support grew, the weight of betrayal lingered. Nights I lay awake replaying my mother's whisper, "Not for you and Ryan's threats." Their absence from family dinners was a relief, yet the void they left was undeniable. Aunt Margaret reminded me often, "Consequences are not meant to heal overnight. They are meant to prevent repeated harm." Slowly, restitution payments began to arrive, though small and irregular. Linda picked up clerical work at a local office. Ryan shuffled between part-time jobs in retail and construction, their incomes meager but tracked by the court. The money that trickled in could not erase what they had done, but it symbolized accountability. For the first time, they were not shielded by excuses or favoritism. They had to answer to the law, not just to me. My own emotions shifted between relief and grief. Relief that truth had prevailed, grief that my own family had been the enemy I fought against. Sometimes I passed by the street where they used to live, the once grand house now tended by strangers. I wondered if my mother regretted her choices, or if she still clung to the belief that she was right. Ryan's anger, I knew, burned without end, but regret, I was not sure he could feel it. Yet no matter what they felt, their downfall was clear to everyone. At church, whispers turned to open condemnation. Old friends confessed privately that they had suspected something was wrong, but never dared to speak. It was a strange comfort to know I had not imagined the cruelty all those years. My grandfather thrived in his clarity. He began spending more time in his garden, his laughter returning slowly at family gatherings with me and Aunt Margaret. We were smaller as a family, but stronger. When restitution hearings came again, the judge was firm. Payments would continue monthly. Missed installments would risk jail time. My mother's shoulders sagged as she nodded. Ryan scowled but stayed silent under the judge's glare. Watching them forced into compliance was surreal. They had spent a lifetime bending rules, manipulating narratives, but now they answered to authority they could not sway. The community no longer looked at them with admiration, but with pity and scorn. They had become a cautionary tale whispered about in town squares and coffee shops. As months passed, I found myself breathing easier. The scars were still there, but the air around me felt lighter without their daily control. The consequences were not just legal or financial, but social and personal. They had lost not only wealth, but the respect they once commanded. And in that void, I found space to grow. By the time December arrived, the city streets glowed with holiday lights, and I felt a chapter of my life finally beginning to close. Months had passed since the trial, and every day had been a step toward reclaiming not just my inheritance, but my identity. With Grandpa Harold's encouragement and Aunt Margaret's unwavering support, I poured myself into opening the studio I had dreamed of since I was a teenager. I chose a location in downtown Salt Lake City with wide glass windows that let in the morning sun and showcased the pieces I had curated. The sign above the entrance read, "Thompson Interiors," the letters clean and proud, and when I saw it for the first time, I cried quietly, knowing that after years of being told I was nothing, I had built something of my own. The opening day was modest but perfect. Grandpa stood beside me in his suit, Margaret at his other side, both smiling as we cut the ribbon together. Neighbors, clients, and even strangers wandered in, their eyes widening at the displays. I had spent months selecting furniture, designing layouts, and crafting spaces that felt alive. Each corner reflected not only style, but resilience. Every design choice was a reminder that I had survived manipulation and deceit and turned it into strength. Business was slow at first, but word spread quickly. A feature in a local magazine praised the studio as fresh and authentic, and soon customers began returning, bringing friends, asking for more. I worked late nights, sketching new designs, but unlike before, these nights were filled with purpose, not despair. Each sale, each satisfied client was proof that I had not been erased. At home, Grandpa's laughter returned. We shared dinners where stories replaced silence, where the weight of betrayal no longer dominated every conversation. Margaret teased him about his gardening, and he teased me about working too hard. It was not the family I had once imagined, but it was real, honest, and full of love. I did not hear much from Linda or Ryan anymore. Occasionally, I received notices from the court about their restitution payments. Small amounts trickled in, evidence that they were scraping by in their reduced lives. I heard they had moved again this time to an even smaller apartment. Ryan worked odd shifts, Linda kept her clerical job, and together they barely managed to stay afloat. Their absence from my life was both painful and freeing. Painful because they were still my family, by blood freeing because they no longer held power over me. Sometimes I wondered if my mother ever regretted the choices she made. Did she lie awake at night replaying the whisper, "Not for you"? Did Ryan ever realize that his arrogance had destroyed him? I would never know. What I did know was that greed had hollowed them out and truth had stripped them bare. I could not change them, but I could choose differently. One evening, as I locked up the studio, I stood outside, watching the city lights flicker against the mountains. The air was crisp, the kind that made every breath feel sharp and alive. I thought of the girl I once was, the one sitting in the garage sketching with borrowed pencils, the one who cried quietly after her mother's insults, the one who doubted if she would ever escape. That girl had survived, and now she had a studio with her name on the door. The betrayal had cut deep, but it had also carved space for truth, for courage, for renewal. I whispered to myself words I wanted etched into my future. Greed destroys families. Truth and courage rebuild lives. The lesson was simple but powerful, one I would carry into every design, every decision, every new chapter. For the first time in years, I smiled not out of relief but out of genuine joy. My story had been twisted by lies, but in the end, truth had written the final line.